Hey guys, welcome back. I just want to start off by apologizing for the monotonous video I posted a few hours ago. Usually I try to incorporate some interactive animations, but I've been a little busy with school. So with that being said, let's start with today's video, which, by the way, I think a lot of you are going to find very interesting. Unlike my previous videos, this video is significantly more relatable as its focus isn't on psychology or comparative mythology. Instead, this video's focus is on one of the most profound concepts: love. More specifically, Joseph Campbell's views on love and marriage. Most of the content that I will be covering today comes from Joseph Campbell's Power of the Myth, which, I'd like to say, is probably one of my favorite nonfiction books I've ever read. It really opened me up to psychoanalysis, comparative mythology, and I'd even say spirituality. So to start, I want to introduce y'all to a really interesting myth that comes from Persia. I know I just said that this video wasn't going to be focusing on mythology, but this myth is particularly interesting because it relates Joseph Campbell's portrayal of love to his overarching themes. Now, I'm not sure if any of y'all are familiar with the fall of Satan or the war between heaven and hell, but just to cover my bases, let me give you a brief summary of what happened according to most Christians. Why was Satan thrown into hell? The story goes that when God created angels, he told them to bow to none but himself. Then he created man, whom he regarded as a higher form than the angels, and he asked the angels to serve man. But Satan would not bow to man. This is interpreted by the Christian tradition as being the egotism of Satan. He would not bow to man. So rewinding back to the Persians actually interpreted this very differently. In the Persian story, Satan couldn't bow to man, not because of his egotism, but because of his love for God. He could only bow to God. So if you recall, God originally had said that the angels were to bow to no one but him, but then, all of a sudden, he changed it up. But at this point, Satan was already committed to God. In his mind, and I'd even go as far as saying that in his heart, Satan could not bow to anyone but God, whom he loved. And then, quite literally, God says, "Go to hell." Now, the worst of the pains of hell, insofar as hell has been described, is the absence of the beloved, which is God. So how does Satan live without God? How does he sustain the situation in hell? By the memory of the echo of God's voice, when God quite literally said, "Go to hell." That is the sign of great love. The greatest hell one can know in life is to be separated from the one you love. Satan is God's lover, and he is separated from God, and that is the real pain of Satan. So I found this particular myth extremely interesting because it sheds the fall of Satan in a completely new light. I won't speak on it anymore, so take what you can from it. So if I were to say to you, hey, let's talk about love, where would you begin? I'm guessing many of y'all would start talking about your significant other. Some of y'all would speak about the stories we're told when we're young. Some of y'all would speak about movies. Some of y'all would even speak about your families. Joseph Campbell likes to start off love by speaking about its origins. So I'm not sure if many of you'll know, but modern day love is a lot different than love in the past. And what I mean by this is the fact that in the past, love wasn't an individual experience. It wasn't anything that you felt on a spiritual plane. It was a very impersonal thing. It wasn't until a group of people called the Troubadours that the idea of a person-to-person love existed. So, a little background on the Troubadours. The Troubadours were the nobility of Provence and then later other parts of France and Europe. In Germany, they're known as the Meunier Singers, or the Singers of Love. After the Crusade of 1209, Troubadours became associated with heresy, and to make a long story short, were prosecuted. The Troubadours were very much interested in the psychology of love, and they're the first ones in the West who really thought of love the way we do now, as a person-to-person relationship. Before them, love was simply eros, the god who excites you to sexual desire. This is not the experience of falling in love the way the Troubadours understood it. Eros is much more impersonal than falling in love. You see, people didn't know about amour. Amour is something personal that the troubadours recognized. Eros and agape, on the other hand, are impersonal loves. Eros is the biological urge someone has. The personal factor doesn't matter in this instance. Agape is love thy neighbor as thyself. Spiritual love. It doesn't matter who the neighbor is. But with amour, we have a purely personal ideal, the kind of seizure that comes from the meeting of the eyes. In this point in history, the courage to love became the courage to affirm one's own experience against tradition, the tradition of the church. This is extremely important in the development of the West because it emphasizes the individual. It says that one should have faith in his experience and not simply mouth terms handed down to him by others. I'm going to go ahead and tell you another story that might make this idea a little bit more clear. In the Tristan Romance, Isolde is engaged to marry King Mark. They have never seen each other, they have never met. Tristan is sent to fetch Isolde to Mark. Isolde's mothers, meanwhile, prepare a love potion so that the two who are to be married will have real love for each other. Unfortunately, the love potion is left unguarded, and Tristan and Isolde think it's wine and drink it. They are overtaken with love. Isolde, who is supposed to marry King Mark, is now in love with Tristan. But they had already been in love, they just didn't know it. The problem with this setup from the troubadour point of view is that King Mark and Isolde, who are to be married, are not really qualified for love. The true marriage is a marriage that springs from the recognition of identity in the other, and the physical union is simply just a confirmation of that spiritual recognition. In Isolde and Mark's case, they hadn't met each other. There was no spiritual recognition, and therefore, it was not a valid love. There's danger in this, of course. After the young couple has drunk their love potion, Isolde's mother goes to Tristan and says, "You have drunk your death." And Tristan says, "By my death, do you mean this pain of love?" Because that was one of the main points, that one should feel the sickness of love. Tristan says, "If by my death you mean the punishment that we are to suffer if discovered, I accept that. And if by my death you mean eternal punishment in the fires of hell, I accept that too." Now that's some big stuff, especially for medieval Catholics who believed in a literal hell. So what is Tristan saying? What he is saying is that his love is bigger even than death and pain, than anything. This is the affirmation of the pain of life in a big way. And he would choose this pain of love now, even though it might mean everlasting pain and damnation in hell. The fact that this wonderful experience of personal love should be condemned as a sin is a thing that troubadours just said no to. Love is the meaning of life, they said. It is the high point of life. And in the end, love takes courage. So as you can probably imagine, with this line of thinking being introduced by the troubadours in the West, many marriages may have dissolved. People were no longer abiding by planned marriages or impersonal love. But it's important to understand that this was not necessarily the goal of the troubadours. They didn't want destruction. They didn't want to destroy marriages. Rather, they celebrated life directly in the experience of love as a refining, sublimating force, opening the heart to the sad, bittersweet melody of being through love, one's own anguish and one's own joy. The troubadours had discovered that love is not love in general. It is love for that woman or that man. They celebrate the agony of love, the sickness that doctors cannot cure, the wounds that can be healed only by the weapon that delivered the wound. The wound in this case is the wound of my passion and the agony of my love for this person. The only one who can heal me is the one who delivered the blow. Now I'm going to take a quick break to relate this whole idea of love to Carl Jung. If you aren't familiar with Jung, then check out my previous videos that introduce him and many of his beliefs. Basically, Jung says this, that the soul cannot exist in peace until it finds its other, and the other is always a you. Like the yin and yang symbol, here I am, and here she is, and here we are. So what about marriage? Marriage is marriage. A marriage is a commitment to that which you are. That person is literally your other half, and you and the other are one. A marriage is a life commitment, and a life commitment means a prime concern of your life. When you have to make sacrifices in a marriage, you are not sacrificing to your other half. You are sacrificing to the relationship. Marriage is a symbolic recognition of our identity, two aspects of the same being. The marriage restates the fact that you and your other half are one. In an interview, someone once asked Campbell, what happens to the self-discovery in love when you meet someone else and you suddenly feel, I know that person, or I want to know that person? He says that it is very mysterious. It's almost as though the future life that you're going to have with that person has already told you, this is the one whom you will have that life with. It's almost as though you are reacting to the future. It's talking to you from what is to be. This has to do with the mystery of time and the transcendence of love and time. I'm going to go ahead and end the video there. I think that this was a great introduction to Joseph Campbell's views on love. While it's a very short chapter in his book, The Power of Myth, I think it's one of the most important chapters. I mean, who doesn't like talking about something as profound as love? So if you're interested in what I spoke about here, you can read many books by Joseph Campbell. The ones I recommend are The Power of Myth, Here with a Thousand Faces, some books by Carl Jung, The Undiscovered Self, The Collective Unconscious, Sigmund Freud, Edward Bernays. Those are all great psychologists, comparative mythology books, authors, etc. Thanks for watching.